Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, new paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week, Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I am Reverend Dr. D. Richard Dugan, and I thank you so much for joining us, along with our very special guest. And it's going to take me back in time a good 45 years, maybe 46, to a time when I was a part of what we're going to talk about partially, but indirectly, the human potential movement, self-help, what have you. Marcia Martin and her latest work, Sex, Power, and Transformation. Thank you so much for being with us. A little titillation for the listeners.
Thank you, Dr. D. Great to be here.
I've been looking forward to this because I was good friends with a gentleman by the name of George Adair, who had a similar kind of program back in the 90s, probably late 80s, early 90s. Now, he was a printer. George Adair was a printer in Phoenix. He since has passed away, but he had this program called Omega Vector and then Delta Vector. And you'd go for 3 nights, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, until sometimes 1, 2 in the morning.
Yes.
Then you'd have to go to work. And then Saturday, Sunday was all day. Sometimes Saturday might let out at 6 or 7 p.m., maybe later. And they tried to let you out a little early on the Sunday to celebrate the new you. And that's really kind of what we're talking about here, especially with your book, Sex, Power, and Transformation, is locating, excellent, the new you. And the reason I brought him up wasn't just for the programs. He came into my studio way back then, and I still have the tape, the reel-to-reel, of how would you, you might call it an audio book of sorts. It was just his reading and talking about the integral aspects of sex on our civilization and the fact that it only exists because of the sexual energy that exists in us as human beings in particular, not exclusively, but in particular. Is that a fair statement to say that is the energy, if you will, that creates?
Well, I would say for sure that is the energy that creates. My book isn't about that so much as the history of, and my story, my memoir of being one of the key architects of the human potential movement. I was there at the beginning of EST, actually pre-EST, when Werner Erhard was leading Mind Dynamics in San Francisco. I was a part of the first training he ever led that had 30 people in it. And by the time we created EST in 1971 October, which later became Landmark worldwide. We started with those 30 people. And by the time I left, I was the vice president and head of the communication registration division. And I was there for almost 10 years. We had almost 800,000 graduates. So I helped create and build EST from the beginning of inception to sustainability, and saw many things along the way that had to do with sex, power, and transformation. Not just sex in the how-to or the energetic force, but also in the politics of and manipulation and what happens when one looks at power and becomes a bit addicted by it. So my book is the story of my life from then until now, and kind of cradled in the history of the human potential movement. It's very exciting and riveting book.
Well, I'm looking forward to having people. Is it, first of all, oh my heavens, is it available in Audible?
Not yet, but we're making that now. It's available right now in hardback or in paperback or in Kindle on Amazon. It's already reached #1 bestseller status in Canada and the US, and also in the hottest new releases. So I'm very proud of it. It's a captivating read for sure.
Absolutely. I want to ask, though, in regards to this whole thing, you got involved in the human potential movement in its infancy.
Yes.
Why? What was it about it that intrigued you such?
I have an interesting story because when I was a young girl, I had an aunt who was a clairvoyant healer and an esoteric astrologist. And in those days, you didn't tell anybody that that's what she was. It was kind of a secret. She was kind of like a white witch or a shaman. And she taught me, I interned with her, and she taught me at a very young age how to meditate. She taught me all the world religions. She taught me how to be strong and personally powerful within myself. She taught me about language. She taught me how to create and manifest. She taught me how to heal myself and others. So by the time that I came in relationship and met Werner Erhard, who was leading his first guest seminar about the mind dynamics training, which was what he was going to teach that February of 1971, I already was quite involved with human potential, growth, self-help in my own development. And what I saw was a way that an organization or a training could bring what I had learned from my aunt to the masses. And so that's why I first was very excited about it. And then, of course, after I became involved, I became very involved, was on the staff, was one of the key architects, helped build it, was the vice president, board member, and the head of the communication registration division. So I was in charge of and responsible for filling all the trainings, events, and everything that we did. And so I learned a lot along the way, a lot about myself, a lot about others, a lot about communication, a lot about business, a lot about production of events. I was putting 10,000 people in the Cow Palace and 5,000 people in other auditoriums. So it was quite a ride.
What was the goal? Not just individually, but collectively, with these hundreds of thousands of people transforming their lives. What was his goal, and what is your goal today in terms of helping people to make that transformational shift, if you will?
Well, you have to go back in time to the early 70s, and it was a very special time. It was the beginning of human potential, and people really wanting to have more power or more ability to cause things, to create things. And mostly people felt victimized by their circumstances. Mm-hmm. And we were at the effect of the weather, another person, events in our lives, traumas. That's how we all looked at life, as if we weren't able to cause or create our own future, as kind of it happened to us. So the beginning of the human potential movement was to open up that kind of arena where people could find their personal power. And the mission was that people learned who they were and were able to connect at a much more powerful part of themselves to be able to be a cause in the matter instead of victim, to be responsible for what was happening to them, for them to be able to create a future. And that's really been my purpose in my work my whole life, is for people to learn more about what was possible and to access that point of personal power and be able to come from it and create the dreams and the things that they want in their life.
Well, now that was 45 years ago, actually 50 or so many years ago.
Yeah, I was two.
Yeah.
You know,
and I remember going through Life Spring, which was sort of an outgrowth of all of this as well, part of the human potential movement.
Yes.
Went through the 3 levels. Then when I married my wife, my first wife, we went through a program, the Delta and Omega Vector programs there in Phoenix. And one of the observations that I was making was during that period was we were going through that, as you just said, the victimhood period.
Yeah.
Then we transitioned into the conversations about codependency.
Mm-hmm.
Then we started shifting further to what I refer to as interdependency. We began to realize we're not victims. This is 2025, and I feel like we're right back where we were in the 70s, where everybody is claiming that it's their fault that we are where we are. And my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life, says, no, I'm sorry to disillusion you, but there are no victims other than those that you choose to allow to live rent-free up in your head. It's a line from Big Bang Theory. Sheldon's nemesis, Will Wheaton, was, as Will said, I'm living right up here rent-free. What happened? Why didn't it take and why didn't it spread? Because usually when one person goes through something and other people see what they're doing and how magnificent their lives are and those kinds of things, they want it too.
Well, that's one of the main threads of my book, is the interesting fact that these organizations that have these charismatic leaders or gurus start off, it seems, to be about having people find out who they are and what is possible. And then somehow the organization that distributes or produces or makes available the methodology that really is enlightening and fantastic and brilliant for you to have that experience of who you are and to be able to be responsible to create and cause things in the universe. Somehow the organization or the leaders sometimes begin to play their own power dynamics and actually cause the same things around the distribution of, or the organization itself of, the thing that they're distributing or producing or making available. It's an interesting dynamic to watch how power changes people. I've seen it with many, many, many important leaders, that they start off wanting to do one thing and somehow it becomes more cultish, more I'm right, you're wrong, rather than you have the capacity to have, if you're in touch with yourself, your own wisdom and your own answer for yourself. And leaders start being the people that start saying they have the answer for you. It's an interesting process. So I hope people do read my book, because I think it's on many dimensions, many things, not just a memoir of my life, but questions that we all have and we all come up against. How do we have the courage to stand up to something that we see isn't working or is not right or not good, but we're afraid to say anything because there's so much agreement with it, or so many people that we're afraid we're going to get expelled or canceled or shunned. It's the whole dynamic is interesting in terms of human potential.
You know, the whole aspect of personal power also was a subject during that period of time into the 90s and even the early 2000s, in terms of people regaining their personal power. No one took it from them. They just sort of acquiesced. They sort of surrendered to the crowd. And majorities have been wrong before, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic because I have my life is kind of backwards. I started off very young, having the experience of being trained to go within, to seek my own inner wisdom, to be connected to a higher source, to have a higher purpose. Most people start with not knowing that and living their life and having a breakdown, having something cause them to maybe look deep within themselves and reconsider what's important in their life. So what happened to me was, because I started with this knowledge that I was powerful, that I could create, that I was responsible, and that everything was possible. Then when I had the journey of the things that happen in all of our lives that take us down, I've lost money, I've had a divorce, I've lost a stepson to suicide. Many things have happened that could have, kind of taken me to a place where I felt like I didn't know what to do with it. But because of my understanding that it was a lesson or a gift or something that I could consider, that I was in training and I could get through, then when you discover how powerful the human spirit is, that's when your life turns around. So it's all an interesting way that we develop or we find ourselves, for sure.
How were you raised philosophically? What was your perspective? Maybe even delving a bit into the whole spiritual aspects of existence. How were you raised?
I was raised in a very scary childhood, and you'll find it in my book. My father was an alcoholic. He beat my mother. I was the eldest of five children, so I was kind of mom. My parents had to work, and they usually worked graveyards. So I ended up being 10 years old, standing on a stool at a stove, cooking dinner and changing diapers and doing homework for the kids. So I've been a mother, so to speak. And we were always what my father said was Heinz 57. We never belonged really anywhere. He would always get fired, and then we would have to move. And I went to maybe 2 or 3 schools a year until I was a sophomore in high school. So I learned very early that I had to make friends fast, that I had to excel quickly, that I had to learn from what I could while I was there, because I would probably leave. I'm not sure that everybody would have done it the same way, but I was very kind of handicapped because of my relationship with my father. I always wanted to please him. I was always kind of searching for making sure he loved me. I wanted to, be okay. And those are patterns, which is another part of my book, because I explain to people and share my own patterns that run us through our lifetime. So I also grew up in a world where men and women weren't equal. I'm a woman and have been an executive my whole life in a world of men, and have had to navigate and figure out how to do it because men and women were treated differently, and they still are. It's just a fact of nature. So it's all of that, Dr. D, together in terms of what I think the book is so riveting, because it is about patterns, but it's also about values, and it's also about a story. It's a thriller almost. You go from chapter to chapter going, oh my God, I wonder what's going to happen. And it's in many different worlds. I've been in politics, I've been in Hollywood, I've been in transformation. So the thread of it all is how people deal with power, and how we deal with our patterns, and how we can be true to ourselves. So I think my childhood, even though it was tough and it was scary and frightening, and I certainly had a lot of patterns from it, it was a good thing for me because it gave me more compassion for people. And it always instilled in me that I thought people should learn how to love each other. And I always thought that my job in life from the time I was about 10 was to teach people how to love. So here I am, a transformational teacher.
Marcia Martin is our guest here on the program, and her book is entitled Sex, Power, and Transformation, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, Reverend Dr. D, and we're here with Marcia Martin, and we're talking about her memoir, if you will, her biography, and telling the story, especially of her helping and being a part, one of the founders, if you will, of the Human Potential Movement. And there were a lot of people who were involved back then in the And it was an outgrowth of the 60s. People were wanting to go find themselves. And one of the things that I was so intrigued by when I was going through the programs, whether it was LifeSpring or the Vectors, was that you could travel 10,000 miles and still stay right where you are. You don't have to go somewhere to find yourself. You need to go within. Let's talk a little bit about the changes not only that the human potential movement made over the years and the years and then the decades, but also the changes that it went through because we're always searching, we're always learning and experiencing and gathering new insights and so forth to the point where here I am today. And one of the thoughts that went through my mind when I was sitting with my first wife, by the way, was totally blind, wanted to go through the Vector programs, and I couldn't let her go by herself. So I said, "Okay, I'll be your guide." Uh-uh. I'm in the room, okay, and guess what? I'm part of the group. And one of
Yeah.
the things that struck me initially was, God, all of these people, when are they gonna get it? And then one of the facilitators stood up and started his spiel and said, "I know a lot of you don't want to be here, but I have a truth that I need to share with you. If you didn't want to be here, you wouldn't be. Ergo, the truth is you do want to be here because you are here. And that goes for every moment in our lives." So, talk to us a little bit about the evolution to this day, 2025, of the human potential movement. It's not, is that still referred to by you in that fashion, or how has that transformed as far as the name, if you will, the label?
I think the human potential movement started off, of course, in the early 70s as a counter from the counterculture of the 60s. And it was more about reflection and discovery and looking for a spiritual quest, more potential as a human being, more power, not in the sense of I'm more powerful than you, but that I matter, I can make a difference. And
Mm.
also was coupled with that we're all one, we're all connected. And so we're a family. Much like the sea is a huge body of water, but when it crashes against the rocks, there's a spray that goes up, and each one of those droplets is its own individual expression of the great body of water. And how
Mm.
I kind of have learned to demonstrate or metaphorically describe what I am as a human being is I'm part of that huge body of water, and I can connect to whatever higher source is or that energetic consciousness if I go within. But I am an individual expression of that. So I'm a Marcia expression. You're a Dr. D expression, but we're all connected
Mhm.
if we go inside and connect at the place where we're all connected. And that was how it kind of started. I think that the human potential movement has turned into the self-help industry. And people have realized that it's a capitalistic society and you can make money from having programs that somehow you can sell to people and tell them they're not as good as they could be. Whereas I feel where it started was we're all great. We've just forgotten it and we need to remember it and get access to it. Now it seems like people are relating to self-help as if you are broken and you need to be fixed and I've got something to fix you. So it's an interesting evolution. But I think at the core, it's that every human being wants to make a contribution. We want our lives to matter. We want it to be bigger than just our day to day activities. We want something that we have contributed that makes us a better world. And somehow that's the essence of self help or the human potential or the personal development industry.
I'm sure you have heard I'm sure you've heard the George Carlin spiel about self-help,
I
especially.
I love George Carlin and went to many of his live performances. So I'm not sure if I've heard it or not, but whatever he said, I think it was probably great.
Well, what's funny is the fact that, and I'm only paraphrasing, and it's not going to be nearly as funny as the way he puts it, but you go into a bookstore and you go to the self-help section to pull out a book, and he's basically posing the question, why are you grabbing that book out of the self-help section when it's self-help? You help yourself, not somebody else helps you. That was his sort of the gist of his
I
humor in
think
that regard. It was very,
that,
very funny. I mean,
yeah.
I of course have read a lot of the books, starting out with, I mean, I've read Ram Dass and I've read Gerald Jampolsky and the people that I interview on this program, Lynn McTaggart and Greg Braden, and the list goes on of all of these people who are part of what we are doing here on this program. We're trying the program, Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true, and looking for those new ways of living because the old ways don't work. All you have to do is look around you. So, what about this human potential movement? We can call it self help. Personal growth is another term that is
Yeah.
used as well. Um, and I'm just wondering, from your perspective, in terms of the various transitions and manifestations over the years, and as I said earlier, it feels like we're right back to the 70s again because everybody is blaming everybody else. And it doesn't matter which religion you are, what political persuasion, economics, it's somebody else's fault. I mean, I hear people moaning and groaning and complaining about the price of things, and yet they still lay down their card, their money, what have you, to buy whatever it is that they're buying. And I'm going, wait a minute, you're complaining about the price of things that you're paying. So, how has your complaining changed the price? This kind of goes to the whole aspect of worry. You know, you can worry about some. My wife and I were in the process of moving, for example, and there are lots of things going on. You could worry about it and worry about how it might go wrong or might go right, but however it ends up, your worry didn't change anything.
Well, I think your worry does something, actually. I think it's a resistance, and resistance creates persistence. And what we learn in the martial arts is if you stop resisting something, it goes away. But people tend to want to resist. And I think worry is a way of resisting. You're saying you don't want it to be the way that it is. That's a resistance to it. The key, I think, and I want to talk about the evolution of consciousness also. The
Please.
key, I think,
Mhm.
is if you're willing to really look at, be with what is actually so, rather than what you wish was so or what you think should be so. A lot of
Mhm.
people live in their heads and live in a world that doesn't, it's not even the world they're living in, and they're making it up. So I think that one of the things that happens with growth is an expansion of consciousness. And I think that there's a certain consciousness. You could make it very simplistic and say it's like in four stages. The first stage is I'm a victim. That's a victim consciousness.
Mhm.
And the thing that takes us to the next stage is something happens when we're victimized, when we feel we're at the effect of, whether it's the weather or the prices or the economy or something, when we consider that we're at the effect and the world is acting on us. That's what I mean by victimhood. And that we can't cause anything. We get to a place where we just get so frustrated sometimes to the point where we just say, I'm tired of this. This is not, and I'm going to do this. And
Mhm.
when we get to that place, it's like our consciousness shifts. And now we have power coming into the world rather than the world acting on us. We're acting on the world. But at that next stage of consciousness, it's still kind of, I want this for me. I'm doing this for me. I want houses. I want cars. I want relationships. I want titles. I want degrees. And it's all me, me, me. And something happens at the end of that stage where you go, and you realize none of the stuff that you've been creating and giving your life up for and sacrificing for really fulfills you, and that there's something else missing, and you say to yourself, is that all there is? And at that point, something happens where your consciousness changes and you look to have a higher purpose. And that is the next stage when you have a higher purpose for what you're doing. And I believe that what happens is whatever the all knowingness of the universe is, watches for that type of consciousness in human beings. When they get to the place where they realize there's something more important than just me, me, me. And the universe will watch for a period of time. And if you live your life toward contributing, somehow the next stage of consciousness is you're used by the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to a place where if you go off track and you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, the universe kind of smacks you in the head and says, get back on track. And you better listen to the signals, because if you don't, it could be very painful. But the universe is using you for its own sake to have a better world. And I think that that whole thing of this expansion of consciousness is what's driving everything. That's
It's
my
been,
answer and my
yeah.
metaphor for it.
It's been said that this is a friendly universe. And it was said by, if I'm remembering correctly, at least as far as the title, a physicist. And it may have been Hawking who made the statement that this is, or maybe it was Carl Sagan, as far, but it was one of these really insightful individuals who made that statement. And it's like the universe is not out to get you. Other people with revenge on their mind, maybe, but that's subjective only from the standpoint if that's your attitude that they're all out to get you. Yeah, someone is going to, because you put out that energy and you bring it back to you.
Also, I
Um,
think not only do you put out the energy and bring it back, that human beings are thrown to certain kinds of behaviors, which
mm,
is to be right, look good, know the answer. So when we expect something, we almost cause it or create instances that prove evidence to us that we are right.
yeah.
And we can find things that prove we're the victim or life is awful or, we should be doing something that we know we shouldn't be doing, but we want to be right about it. So
Yeah.
I would also say the universe is not only friendly, but it's random. And
Mm,
so that may look like unfriendliness when
yeah.
out of the blue something happens that you don't expect, but that's also the universe we're living in, is we live in a random universe. Things happen.
Absolutely. Marcia Martin, my guest, sex, power, and transformation. And we'll continue that as we continue here on the program that gives you new paradigms for a new world. Tell me your story. One of the other aspects, Marcia, that I want to talk to you about is this, and continuing dovetailing off of what we were just talking about in terms of the universe. Um, I am a big proponent, but not, and I would say that I'm probably a proponent now more because it's coming more naturally to me in trusting my intuition, that still small voice. We encourage people during the decade of perfect vision, the 2020s. It was the year of perfect vision, 2020. And we started promoting that in September of 2019, that we wanted people to spend some time going within to a place where no one else can get to. It took me a while to discover that, by the way, that no one else can get to stop and listen to. You can call it prayer, you can call it meditate, whatever you want to call it, and listen to that still small voice. Now, the reason I say it's coming more naturally is because one of the aspects of my still small voice, I call my friend, is that I've been tested. There was, I mean, you talk about random, there wasn't a necessarily a, hey, you need to turn left versus right up here. It's, and I didn't find this out until after the test was over, that I was being tested. You say you trust me. Okay, but do you really? Then follow these instructions. And so I did. And I was bicycling to work. And instead of taking the 1 mile path past this one area to get to work, I ended up going 3 miles out of my way to get to work because the impression just would not go away. The it was like I went a half a mile down that 1 mile stretch. I had to turn around.
Yeah.
I actually had to turn around and go back the other way. And then I went that 3 miles out of my way. And I'm going, what the heck? Did I miss an accident? Did I, that, that's usually the question we ask. What am I avoiding? What's, that kind of thing. And it was more, okay, do you really trust me? Prove
Mm.
it. Prove that you trust me. Now, I believe that the still small voice will never put you in harm's way, but it will test you. It will challenge you. And I've had that happen on many occasions where I finally acquiesced again. And 2 days later, it's like, man, am I glad I made the decision that I was prompted to make? Because if I hadn't, today things would be a lot worse.
Yeah.
Talk to us about these in your life, in your experiences, and then how you share this. How important, how vitally important, if it is vitally important, your still small voice, your intuition, your gut feeling, whatever you want to call it, is to your not just being here, but being the person that you are that shines that light on other people saying, hey, over here, I'm doing this. It's not going to hurt you.
Well, I think the still voice is really important. And fortunately for me, I had someone in my life that taught me how to be quiet and still to be able to even hear it. So, from the very early age of almost 18, I was meditating and learning about energy and learning about metaphysics from my aunt, who, like I said, was a clairvoyant healer and an esoteric astrologist. And I interned with her and started learning how to be still and how to go within and how to listen to that voice. I think it was Deepak Chopra that said that your mind is like an ocean. And when the ocean is raging, if you've ever been, and I have been out on a boat between islands in the Hawaiian Islands on 30-foot seas, and I can tell you that that's really terrifying. And you could throw the Empire State Building into that raging water and you wouldn't have the effects. You wouldn't know anything different than just all the raging. You wouldn't see the ripples that
Right,
it made.
right.
But then, I can remember nights in Honolulu sitting by the yacht club and the sea was so still, it was like glass. And in that kind of a sea, you can take a tiny pea and throw it into the water and you can see every ripple that it makes. And your mind is like that. It can be raging and noisy, or it can be quiet and still. When it's quiet and still and you hold a thought, that thought can be created into something real. When it's raging, that thought gets messed up and everything else. And so that small, tiny, quiet voice is heard when the sea is still. And you have to practice quieting your mind so that you can hear your inner voice. And most people will say, well, I can't meditate. When I sit down and I close my eyes, I get antsy and I have to stand up. Well, you're a beginner. And that's where you're starting. And the way that you learn is through practice. And if you practice enough, pretty soon you can be still for 5 seconds, then 10 seconds, then a minute, then 3 minutes, then an hour. When you get to that place where you can be still, you hear that voice clearly. But even if you have a raging mind and you haven't been trained, that voice, like you said, is your teacher and your tester and the person or the thing that protects you. And it will be heard through all of the noise if necessary. Some people still refuse to listen, but the powerfulness of intuition is not to be taken lightly.
And I would definitely agree with you. It's been a fascinating journey for me in that regard because I could not do the things that I do.
Yeah.
And this program is an example of that. And that example is this. The universe asks the questions. I'm just along for the ride. Now, I do have a curious mind, and that's where some of my questions come from. But I've even had situations where I'm in the middle of an interview and this question comes into my head and I process it going, no, that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about. What are you doing? Go away, go away, shoot, shoot. And it won't go away. And so in the middle of the interview, I stop and I say, I'm sorry, I have to stop here and I have to ask you this question because the universe or my still small voice, my intuition is saying, ask this question. And so I ask the question and off we go in a different direction that somehow miraculously manages to circle back around to the general subject that we were talking about. And that's why it's so frustrating when I get guests or PR firms, what have you, that say, "Can you send us a list of questions?"
Oh, I know. I hate that.
No, I'm sorry, because I don't know we are going to ask. But it's fun. It really is a blast because there are answers that come out. And one of my favorite responses to some of these questions I've asked over the years is, I've done 5 million interviews and no one's ever asked me that question before. And when I hear that response, I'm going, yeah, that was the question that was supposed to be asked.
That's right. Good for
So
you.
it's a lot of fun. Marcia Martin is our guest, and we're talking about her book, Sex, Power, and Transformation. I want to talk more about transformation, and there's the book. It is, and you folks will see it if you're looking at the video, and we'll continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I want to talk, Marcia Martin, author of Sex, Power, and Transformation, about transformation. There's a biblical passage that I quote quite often, having to do with, and I think it had something along the lines, I don't know if it was a Sermon on the Mount or what have you, but his disciples were saying, hey, wow, and you just turned water into wine, or you just raised that guy from the dead, or you did this or that or the other. It's like, what? Could you teach us how to do that? And again, I paraphrase because I'm not King Jimmy. Sure. But the stuff I've been doing, that's kid stuff compared to the work that you folks are going to do. And I honestly do believe, myself, as the Reverend Dr. D, that greater works he was talking about was the transformation of our lives. Because that's all he was talking about as far as what we have to seek ye first the kingdom of God and all his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Not that all these things really matter in the material world, because I'm talking about something higher, something greater than this material world. Yeah, you're in this, but what is the phrase? We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think transformation is an interesting concept to discuss because it's not change. And I remember in the early 70s when I was leading guest seminars and I was telling people about the S training so that they could choose whether or not they wanted to take it. And I would tell them what the purpose was. And the purpose was to transform the way in which you're experiencing living. And so that all of those situations that you are putting up with or trying to change clear up just in the process of life itself. Well, every hand would go up in the audience and they would say, what is transformation? So it's a buzzword now, and everybody thinks that everybody knows what it is. But I remember years of answering the question, what is transformation? What do you mean by that? Well, I went to Werner and I said, Werner, what is transformation? What does that mean? And he said, oh, it's like when the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. And then being the young woman that I was, and listening and saying, oh, okay, thank you for telling me, go back into the guest seminars and say, oh, it's like when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. So I learned many years later that caterpillar turning into a butterfly is not such a simple thing, and it's very dangerous. And what happens, it's not that a caterpillar's legs become a butterfly's legs or a caterpillar's eyes become a butterfly's eyes. It doesn't change. That caterpillar goes into a soup. It disintegrates. It goes back to its original source energy. And that soup is reconstituted into a new species. So I call transformation, when it comes to personal development, is when you let go of that old part of yourself, your beliefs, your perspectives, the things that have driven you, the things that you've counted on, the things that you will fight for, but that you let them go back to the beginning where you can recreate them and reconstitute them into something else, maybe a new belief, a new perspective that works better for what your life is and what you want, rather than just being right about the fact that that's what you believed. So transformation is a heady thing. It's a dangerous thing. The path to enlightenment has its dark and its light side, and one needs to be cautious. And that's why I say in my book, that I want people to get to the place where they trust their own answer, not where they just follow some charismatic leader and have their answer for themselves. They need to have their own answer, not somebody else's answer.
You know, it's interesting that you put it that way. For some years, and I at the time was working for a Christian radio station back in the 80s and early 90s during the heyday of televangelism. I used to think, and it was just interesting. I used to think that I was missing something by not following someone. Now, my metaphysical primer is Autobiography of a Yogi. I've read it, I don't know,
Ah,
maybe a
that's
hundred
a great
times.
book. Yes.
Okay. Found out Steve Jobs, that was the only book he had on his phone.
Wow.
So pretty spectacular. And I've read people like Ram Dass, and I've read Leo Buscaglia, and I've read I mean, just Augmandino is sort of, he's the kind of the one that brought my
Yeah.
first wife and I together through his book, Greatest Miracle in the World. And I mean, the list goes on of all of these different people that either I've interviewed or I've read their books or I've watched their DVDs and so on and so on and so on. And thinking I'm missing out on something because I don't have a folk. Okay, I'm going to become a devotee of Paramahansa. Dead or alive, I'm going to become okay. Or some of his followers. There was a gentleman by the name of Sri Ananda was his name, Swami Sri Ananda. He went. He was the last until his passing. He was the last living teaching disciple of Paramahansa, and he wrote his own book about his experiences, and so on and so on and so on. And then it really dawned on me about the whole aspect of that still small voice, my friend. And I realized that the only person that I need to follow is me. And that is not putting me up on a pedestal. All right. So folks, don't get me wrong. That is not what I'm saying.
No.
What I'm saying is that the answers that I need for me come from within. Now, I appreciate it if Marcia, if you suddenly you say you're a clairvoyant or a psychic or what have you, you get these impressions for other people that you say, hey Richard, I'm getting this message that blah 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 blah. But what really incensed me in those days was God told me to tell you, and I would say, I'm sorry, but he has my number. I'll even take the call collect.
Yeah,
Okay,
there
I
you go.
appreciate what you're trying to say. So, this aspect of having a guru, if you will, and in many instances, and in our day and age here in this country in particular, we have people who have turned these religious and political and economic and educational figures into gurus. And I
Yeah.
remember saying that to one of my dear friends. Her name was Ramona Richards. She's since passed, and I considered her a mentor. And I told her that, and she says, "No, do not call me a mentor. I am your good friend, but I do not like the title mentor." Um,
I was just going to respond to what you said in terms
Please.
of the great teachers that I've had have always been the ones that ask me questions and
Yeah.
allow me to find my answer. The teachers that tell me their answer and want followers and slaves almost, or
Yeah.
people to do their bidding,
Hmm.
are the ones that I think we have to be wary of. I think that, again, when you go within and you find answers for yourself, it's because you're so connected to a higher consciousness, like that great sea, that big body of water, where you're an individual expression of humanity. You look like this, you sound like this, you have this kind of personality. But at some deeper level, we're all the same body of water or consciousness. We're all connected. And there's wisdom in that that flows through us. And when we connect to that, we find what's best for us.
Hmm.
And I think that the great teachers who understand that truth will ask more questions and give less answers
Yeah.
because they're asking you to look at areas where you find your own answer.
I am always fascinated by what these folks, and I prefer to use that term you've just used, teachers. Mentors,
Mm.
fine, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I don't follow anyone in particular in that regard. I love the stories in autobiography. My favorites are like the Tiger Swami. the cinescope story where Paramahansa, I believe it was Paramahansa who was given the experience of omnipresence. He could see everything in every direction. Disney tried to duplicate that in one of its rides, so to speak, with the 360-degree camera screening. It was fascinating. It was really very cool. Um, and
Well,
you're
I hope you'll
absolutely
put
right.
my book on your list of things that you love because I did my best to share my story in such a way that it opens up answers where it's a question that opens up an answer for somebody else that they answer themselves.
Well, I've only had an opportunity to flip through it, but the reality is, yes, I would. Primarily because of the title and because of what I have had to experience through you on this program.
Mm,
Because this whole aspect of sex, power, and transformation, which folks is the title of the book, which is available at Amazon as well. Audible is coming. Looking forward to that as well. Um, it doesn't take long sometimes to develop an impression of someone or what have you. And I don't want to say judgment. That's not what I'm obviously not
yeah.
talking about that. You get a vibe, you get a feeling about someone who is genuine, who is doing the best they can. And one of the one of the nicest, kindest compliments that one can receive, such as yourself, maybe even myself, is when someone is watching you for a period of time, experiencing whether they're a relative or just a friend or an associate, a business acquaintance, and they say to you in, say, maybe a private conversation of sorts, they says, you know what? I noticed that you really walk your talk.
Mm,
And when someone says that to you, you're not only being heard, you're being seen, you're being experienced. And that is one of those situations where, I really like what they're doing. I want that for my life. I want to do that too. You inspire someone to want to transform their lives. And then they
I
might turn
love
to you and
that.
say, what did you
Yeah.
read? What did you experience? And you can go from there.
Well, I love that you said that because one of the things I found for my book to be powerful, and I found it is based on what people have told me,
Hmm.
is that I had to share all of it about myself,
Yeah.
not just the good,
The
but the
good, the
bad,
bad, the
the
ugly.
ugly. I had to be, I had to give it all because you need it all to be authentic.
Yeah.
It can't just be, oh, I know this and this is the way I lead my life. I mean, I've made mistakes, big mistakes, and I've had questions that I didn't have the right answers for in terms of when I look back at what happened. And I've had
Yeah.
things that, could have been better. But I think that what you're saying is really accurate, that people know when you're real, people know when you're authentic, people know when you're walking your talk. And I've done the best I can to do that in my life. And that's one of the questions I have about the whole transformational industry is here we're supposed to be transformational leaders that open up possibilities for others.
Yeah.
And yet we get so addicted to power, fame, money. So it really sex, it is about sex, power, and transformation. And I hope your readers will read my book. And if they have any questions or want more about me, they can go to my website, marciamartin.com. Marcia, and I hope they read my book, Sex, Power, and Transformation.
That's right. And then all of you, after reading her book and going to her website, can say, Marcia, Marcia, Marcia.
That's right.
I couldn't resist. I
I
will
know.
share with you one insight that I discovered. And again, when I share my insights, they're mine. They're for me. I'm not
Yes.
putting them on anybody else. I'm not saying you got to live this way or what have you. But I was asked some time ago to deal with all of the mistakes that I've made in my life. Now, at first, I didn't know where the response came from, but this was my response. I'm sorry, but I have never made a mistake in my life. Never. What I have had are life experiences and lessons learned, but
Yes.
not mistakes. Because I've struggled a long time with this concept of duality.
Mm.
When you look out into the universe and you watch all this stuff happening through a giant telescope or the Hubble or the James Webb telescope, you go, ooh, ah, wow, like you're watching fireworks. When you look through an electron microscope at the microscopic, microcosmic world, you do the same kind of thing. Oh, that's interesting. Wow. Okay, it's fascinating. But you're not judging it good or bad. But when we get to our level, I call the mid-crow, mid-co level, the macro, micro, mid-crow,
Hitco.
we're judging it like it's there's no tomorrow. And I finally came to the realization, and I may have been from one of my guests or one of the books I've read and so forth, that there is no duality on this plane. It is what it is. All right. We got to notice that our tenancy's been terminated by the landlord and we have to be out of the place we're living right now. Bad. No.
No.
We chose to move here almost 20 years ago and we've gotten to the 20-year mark and this is just what's happening.
Yes.
And then of
Like
course
to say, you know what I'd like to say, Dr. D, to get people out of that filter, good, bad,
yeah,
because people look through those lenses at life. And, when you're on the surfboard, the waves are high or low, but you don't say they're a good wave or a low wave. You just do what you need to do in order for you to be okay on that wave. So I
yeah,
say, look at life in terms of, is it working? Not is it good or bad, but is what you're doing, what you're thinking, what your actions are they actually producing the result that you want? And if they're
yeah,
not, do something else. It's not that it's good or bad. It's just that it works or it doesn't work.
yeah. Well, there's that Einsteinian phrase or quote, definition. Doing the same thing over and over again is the definition, expecting a different result is the definition of insanity.
Yes, that's right.
So
I agree.
if doing the same thing over and over again isn't working, you can either spend your time in a rubber room
Yeah.
or you can do something different. And that's what I'm loving about this transformational process my wife and I are going through. We're buying a house. Amazing that we're buying,
Congratulations.
going from renting to buying.
Wow.
It is probably twice to three times the floor space that we have here. And it's just amazing. And even my wife rolled over yesterday while we're watching TV and said to me, she says, I had an insight. She says, I just realized, and I can't believe the insight, that here we are in our senior years. I'm in my mid 70s. She's in her I'm in my mid 60s. She's in her mid 70s. And we're buying a house. It just dawned on me, and she was saying, I've been worried about all this other stuff, the minutia that's going on and so forth. And we're actually doing this. And,
I'm
and
so
it's just
happy for
exciting.
you. This
Yeah.
is
Well, thank
wonderful.
you. We're
Yeah.
talking with Marcia Martin, and this is Tell Me Your Story. Marcia, I hate when interviews have to come to an end, but they can't go on forever. I don't know who would listen to or watch a 2 or 3 or 4 hour conversation. I might sit around a fire pit or a campfire or something like that, or in front of our fireplace at our new home and have a 3 or 4 hour conversation. But we have to bring this to a close, unfortunately. For now, we'll have you back to talk
Oh,
more.
wonderful.
And I want to thank you for being a part of the work we're doing here to do just what you talked about at the beginning of the program, and that is to change the world for the better for everyone, in spite of the fact that everybody has a different definition and vision of what is better. We want to help that to happen by giving them choices and knowledge of the choices to help make their dreams come true. And the final analogy I'll give you is the way that happens is you get into the flow. It's like, all right,
That's right.
you have a river, and my eldest sister, she could float on her back for hours. I, on the other hand, would sink. Now I can float face down very easily. So anyway, you lay back and you know how to float on your back and you let the current carry you. Now,
Mm,
you can kind of guide yourself a little bit by paddling over to the one bank and then maybe out to the middle and over to the other bank, but you continue to allow the current to carry you
mm,
maybe out to sea. Okay, fine. And there are currents out there too. But the river is the metaphor, and we need to allow ourselves to be carried and
mm.
trust the universal current. That's probably the hardest thing, isn't it?
It is difficult and it is worthwhile. And I'm so grateful and honored to be on your show. And thank you for sharing about my book. And just really wonderful to have a conversation with you, Dr. D. Thank you
Well,
so much for all the work that you do in the world.
well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I do have three final questions that I ask all of my guests.
Oh,
And this being 2025, we started this program in 2007. So this is our 18th year. And I'm just grateful for everybody who's participated. But I want to thank you folks for listening and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. And we are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We're podcasting on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and you can watch these conversations on YouTube. We hope that you will subscribe as well as click notification. We also ask you to go to Amazon to get your copy of my book, Choices: 5 Steps for Life. It's Amazon. It is available in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle. With the Audible, it's done. I'm just trying to figure out how to get it up there. So I'm working on that, and hopefully very soon, before the end of the month, we'll have it up. And then we ask you to take that time, as always, to spend it in that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place, to spend time listening to that still small voice. And with all that being said, we now go to our final three questions for a very special guest who we will have back again. First question is, who is Marcia Martin?
who is Marcia Martin? I am a person who loves life, loves people, and wants to do my best to make this a better world.
What gets you up in the morning?
What gets me up in the morning, truthfully, is my cat, who is always pissed off at me that I'm not up early enough to get the food out much earlier than I do. No, what gets me up in the morning is joy.
Mm. And finally, what was your best day?
Oh, wow. I think my best day. You know, Dr. D, I just realized flashing before my eyes are so many best days. My best day, I think, was one of the days that I held my dog, Summer, in my arms as she was passing. I spent 10 hours with her, telling her all the stories of from the time she was a puppy. And she left very naturally and quietly in my arms. So that was a very special day.
I can relate to that very much so. We've gone through that, I want to say like 14 or 15 times in the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And it is still incredible, incredible. Thank you again for joining us. And thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to love. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life and you being in mine. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.